Welcome, everyone. We'll wait just a minute or two for people to trickle in, but thanks for joining us today. If you feel inclined, feel free to put your name and affiliation or where you're coming from in the chat. Great, we've got Tillamook represented, Ben Redman. All right, well, I'll get started. We're excited to have folks joining us today to be talking about the Moderate Income Revolving Loan Program, or as I've learned is called MERL, just a great acronym. I am Talia Concrevis. I am the Assistant Director of Homeownership Programs, and I'm joined today by a whole crew of wonderful folks from OHCS. In particular, the Planning and Policy Division or representatives from that division from the affordable rental side of OHCS, and they've been working really hard to develop a framework for this new program, which we're excited to talk to you all about today. So this, just a quick background, even though we'll go into a lot more about it, this program came to OHCS by way of Governor Kotek's housing package last session. And the affordable rental housing policy and planning team has been creating this framework and doing a lot of engagement around MERL. And so we're still in that process of hearing from potential stakeholders that will utilize this program. So this is a really important part of that engagement today, to hear more about the homeownership perspective. So if you go to the next slide, I'll just talk about the agenda and some of our objectives today. So Rick Razika is here, and he will walk us through the MERL framework overview. And then we'll turn to key discussion topics, and we have a bunch of questions for everybody here today. And you know, our team's capabilities aren't always consistent, but we'd love to hear from you through hands raised and unmuting, or we will have an easy retro board activity that people can participate through. So we plan to have a lot of engagement, and we're really hoping to hear from you all today. And then we'll have time for questions from you all and respond to the best of our abilities, or take that as a question that we can follow up on in the future. And we'll talk about some next steps for launching this program. So if you go to the next slide, our objectives are to inform you all about what SB 1537 and the MERL program is. So again, Rick will share key points of the framework and how we're thinking about how it's going to work. We want to gather feedback from everybody and consult with you all. That it will really inform how we can make this program work smoothly for specifically homeownership development, because there's already been an engagement session where a lot of rental developers gave their feedback. And so this is our chance to hear more about how this can work in the homeownership development context. It doesn't mean that we won't take other feedback about other types of development. We're happy to hear it all. But again, today our focus is specifically homeownership. And then again, we're going to share implementation progress, current timelines, and next steps. And just before I pass it over to Rick, a few process agreements. If you go to the next slide, we're all here to foster an inclusive environment. We hope you all stay engaged. We hope you speak your truth responsibly, listen to us and others to understand, be willing to do things differently and experience discomfort, and expect and accept non-closure. This is a program that's still in development, so we might not be able to answer everything today or solidify everything, but know that answers will likely be coming soon because there's a relatively quick implementation timeline for this. And with that, I will pass it over to Rick Rosika, Assistant Director of Planning and Policy. So thanks so much, Rick.
Thank you, Talia, and thanks to the homeownership team and all of you for coming today. We really appreciate, really appreciate this opportunity to be able to discuss this particular program with this specific group. Being in affordable rental housing, the home ownership perspective on this program, which in the program encompasses both affordable rental housing and home ownership, I think is really important for us. And we've been leaning into Talia and Matt and the crew to help us with this, but we really need your assistance as users of the program to help us think through kind of all the things that you need support on, all the things the supporting jurisdictions need support on, and so on. And so, again, thank you for coming. I think one of the first lessons we learned in starting our engagement process is when we say SB 1537, that's specific to us internally because we only have one piece of the SB 1537 legislation, which is the Housing Revolving Loan Program. But there are a lot of pieces to SB 1537, and so we have to be careful when we use that because we're not talking about the whole bill. Here at OHCS, we're really focusing in on that Housing Revolving Loan Program because that is the piece OHCS is directly involved in. The entire package, again, as Talia mentioned, it's a Governor Kotek's kind of primary, I think, only bill in the short session in 2024. It was a $376 million bill. This particular piece of the bill is a $75 million fund that we're standing up. Again, it was called the Housing Revolving Loan Program in the bill. We've kind of renamed it the Moderate Income Revolving Loan Program. We do that just so that developers, folks that are interested, really understand that there are AMI restrictions attached to these dollars. So it can't just go to all housing. There are some restrictions. It doesn't mean we're still thinking through like what mixed income applications and things like that might mean. But in terms of the dollars, there has to be income restrictions tied to the property in some way, shape, or form. So that's what this particular bill did, and that's what we're here to talk about today. Next slide, please. So a very high level, and then I think we have a really nice slide that our operations team has put together, so we'll kind of go more in depth. But basically what the Moderate Income Revolving Loan Program does in kind of a really high level nutshell is a sponsoring jurisdiction, which is a city or a county, can decide to run this program or allow this program in their community. To do that, they'll pass an ordinance, and that really allows them to receive a zero interest loan from OHCS. That loan can be used to grant to a property owner, a developer, as to help them build new housing of some kind. How the program works is whatever that property's whatever the value of that property is before the improvement is added to it. So the current land value is currently taxed at a certain rate. To make that development happen, or when that development would occur, what the plans of that would be, there would be an estimated value or a proposed value of what that finished product or that improved land would look like. The difference between the current rate and that estimated value of what the developed property would be is basically exempted for a period of time around approximately 10 years. And that calculation, the taxes that would have been made on that property, less fire district taxes, times approximately 10 years is what that grant could potentially look like. So that's what the value of the grant from the city to the property could be. Um, so again, OHCS would provide that money to the sponsoring jurisdiction. They would grant that money to the property. Once that property is built utilizing those funds, the property is not assessed those improvement taxes, but instead they pay those taxes as a fee. And that fee is what is used to repay OHCS for that loan. So in essence, the city is really it's really kind of a tax increment financing type of program. The city is really exempting those taxes, even though they're collecting them to pay back the loan. They're really exempting those taxes on that property for a period of 10 years and giving that money to the property up front so that it can actually develop the land. So this is kind of conceptually supposed to work. Next slide, please. Okay, this is our best shot right now of trying to kind of boil this down into like a 30-foot a level kind of view. We understand that with each one of these boxes, and I'll explain those more here in a second, but with each one of those boxes are a bunch of things that happen. So it's not as easy as these words look like, but I think this gives you a feel for the flow of how the program is supposed to work. All of the orange boxes are the sponsoring jurisdictions that decide to utilize this program. All of the green boxes are the developers or homeowners or whoever's going to use the program. All of the light blue boxes are county assessor or treasurer's responsibilities. And OHCS's responsibilities are like the turquoise or the dark blue box off to the right. So how this starts, up top left, the sponsoring jurisdiction has to adopt an ordinance of some kind saying, establishing the program that they will exempt the information, or they will exempt the property taxes under this program and follow the program guidelines. Each sponsoring jurisdiction really has the ability to kind of formulate the program how they want to, as long as they follow the general guidelines. So for example, if the program's caps are 120% AMI, city may say we only want to do 80% and below AMI. City may decide, or county may decide, we only want this to be used for home ownership. So there's a lot of different things the city can, or county, the sponsoring jurisdiction, can decide they want or don't want to do, as long as it's within the ability of the legislation. Once they adopt that ordinance, next box is the green box where it says developer applies for the Merle grant. So at that point, the developer would say, okay, we're interested in this program. The city has authorized it. Whatever package of information the city is asking for, the developer would provide that information to the city. And then what the city does with that information is the first step is they need to understand what that grant value is. And so they'll send that to the county tax assessor, who will make a determination as to, okay, what were the taxes previously? And then what is the estimated taxes based upon this proposal that's being sent to us? And as I mentioned before, they'll take that times approximately 10 years. I say approximately because it's basically 10 years, but there are some ability to change that. And so 10 years is what kind of the standard is. Whatever that amount is, if that fills the gap of this program, that this isn't, or this project, if this project isn't being developed because they can't fill that gap with any kind of funding, it's called a but-for test in this legislation. If this project isn't happening but for these funds, then the sponsoring jurisdiction would then approve that, and provided all the information is provided to them, they would approve that and under a provisional process, and then they would send that to OHCS for further review. OHCS is basically is responsible to make that determination of that but-for test. We provide a pro forma that the cities will use. There will be one for homeownership and there will be one for affordable rental housing, and we think they'll look different. Um, and then we will review that application and make a determination as to whether or not we think that this development wouldn't happen but for these funds. If approved, we will let the city know, enter into an agreement with the city or the county. I say city interchangeably, I mean sponsoring jurisdiction. We will let the sponsoring jurisdiction know that we've approved it, and we would provide them with those loan funds. They would use those loan funds to grant that to the developer. And then they have to adopt a resolution for each one of those agreements that they enter into, and they would enter into an agreement with the developer. At that point, the city also lets the county tax assessor know this is a development under this program, so the county tax assessor can do the things that they need to do to make sure that they're not going to tax that property and instead charge a fee. And so that's the kind of their process at that point. And then the developer is responsible to provide kind of annual updates to the sponsoring jurisdiction to let them know, hey, we're not built yet. We don't think we'll be built until X year, what have you. Once it is built, depending upon when it's built, and there's some timelines in the legislation that kind of correspond with kind of what tax county assessors need to know, or when they need to know the information, and how that affects their annual tax process. But wherever that falls, and whenever it's done, then the developer would start paying taxes differently upon the development. They continue to pay the kind of pre-improvement taxes, but then they're going to be charged a fee in the same bill. So it's all going to be under the same billing. You don't have to pay two different payments. It's just one payment that's made to the tax through the property tax process. It's just that the bill is going to show different costs for different things. One of them is going to be a fee, and then when those payments are made by the developer or the homeowner to the assessor, or to the treasurer, then the treasurer makes those payments out. And so the treasurer is responsible, just like they would for any kind of assessment extra that they make, whether that be, school districts, fire districts. OHCS will just be one of those payments that they make utilizing those fees. At the end of the term, when the developer has made all the payments back that were tied to that grant amount, it's really the grant amount plus some things, which we can get into. But when they make all of those payments back, then that property just goes back to the normal tax roll, and then you pay taxes as normal. There's an adjustment factor in there. So every year you start paying taxes, you're going to pay kind of that estimated fee, and then the next year you pay that estimated fee plus 3%, and then the next year you pay that whatever that amount was plus 3%. So it lines up just like a normal property tax process would, because that's generally how the property taxes work. Also in that grant amount or that fee payment is added admin costs. There's 5% admin costs for the sponsoring jurisdiction, or up to 5% for the sponsoring jurisdiction, and 1% that goes to the treasurer, so that they can do all the administration associated with that, and that gets paid for out still through those fees. So all of that's tacked on to those taxes, to that really fee structure when you're paying those fees back. So recognize that and that escalator. OHCS's cost and administration is covered through the legislation itself. So that is kind of high-level view of the process. I think I saw a lot of questions come in, so I'm happy to try to answer the ones that I can. So maybe is that what you want me to do now, Talia?
That sounds great, and I can read them
Okay,
to you.
great.
So all property, or the question is, are all property taxes exempt, or only the sponsoring jurisdiction's property tax?
All property taxes are exempt, less fire district taxes. Fire district taxes will increase as if they didn't have the exemption. Everything else is exempted. That's my understanding. And that's just the exemption from um, pre pre-improvement to post-improvement. So you're still paying for all the taxes pre-improvement. You're just being exempted that difference between pre-improvement and post-improvement. But fire district taxes are going to increase as if those taxes increase. That's the only one that's different.
Thanks, Rick.
Mhm.
And then and happy to take this, or you can give the first answer, but for homeownership, would that really be the developer's responsibility to pay those charges back, or would it be the individual home buyers that pay it directly to the assessor?
Yeah, so that's like the $1,000 or $1 million question here, right? I think that's why this is like different and more complicated. So I think the developer gets the grants, but it feels like the homeowner it would be the one that's responsible to make repayment. And so, how do we do that in a manner that's fair and equitable? How do we pass those savings, or how do we pass those savings on to the homeowner? Is that reducing the price of the sale? Is that, what does that look like? That's what it seems like to me, but I don't know how you enforce that or make sure that that happens. And so that's something that we would love to get your feedback on, because we feel like it's really important that the homeowner share that benefit and that savings. But the way this is set up, the grant goes to the developer, the homeowner pays the fees.
Yeah, so hopefully we can dig into that a little bit more
Mm.
in the discussion and question
Yeah.
part of this. There's one more question in the chat. So you do not need to get concurrence from other districts like the multi-unit PT exemption program.
Yeah, good question. So what this program requires is that um, whatever jurisdiction is whatever the sponsoring jurisdiction who wants to implement this program is, they must consult with the other local government, and they're defining local government as the other city or county. And so there has to be some sort of consultation between those two governmental groups. But that's all that is required under this legislation. We don't know exactly what consultation sounds like or means, and we're trying to dig into that. So if you have thoughts on that, what we've heard from our other engagement processes is that um, consultation means different things, but they would like it to be something light touch. So that's what we've heard, is that probably some kind of meeting, some kind of agenda to prove that there was a conversation. But it doesn't, the way we're interpreting this right now is that, and again, we're at pre development stage, we're still taking information, but the way we're understanding it right now is that consultation isn't necessarily approval of that other government. It's just really a conversation with the other government, so they understand what's happening and what their responsibilities would be in the process.
Great. And there's still some activity in the chat. So
Great.
let me keep going with some questions for
Sure.
you. Um, so what statutory language would permit or require reduction of purchase price equal to the taxes to be repaid?
Yeah, I don't know that there is any, right? So do we even have the authority to do that under this bill? I don't know. And so I think that's why we're really asking for input on this. We'll run it by our Department of Justice attorneys in terms of whatever we decide to determine if it is legal or not legal. There are some things I can tell you right now that we would love to see added to this program or done with this program that just we don't have the authority to do. And so I'm not sure we're going to have the authority to do anything to make sure that that happens. But it's certainly a conversation we want to have, and it's certainly something that we think feels right. Ultimately, it feels like the homeowner should benefit from this program in some way. Maybe that isn't shared 100%. I don't know. And that's why we would love your feedback in terms of what feels right to you. But ultimately, I think this is going to come down to a legal determination in terms of what we can and can't do.
And Rick, part of that, right, is that in the statute, the homes have to be affordable to 120% area
Right.
median income and less. So
100%.
The local jurisdiction will probably play a role in
Right.
ensuring that eligibility and that the sales price is affordable. So we're hoping that the grant amount is to subsidize that affordability piece, but it might
Right.
not be a direct like pass through amount.
Yep, correct. That's exactly right. And so, yeah, so maybe that's enough. And it's also, as I mentioned before, any sponsoring jurisdiction does have the ability to say, yeah, 120 isn't low enough. We want to go to 100%, and that's what. But the legislation really kind of starts at 120. It has to be 120 in order for you to be able to utilize this program. But cities do have sponsoring jurisdictions do have the ability to modify that in a way that's more stringent.
Okay, there's still a few more questions. Rick, do you want to keep, let's take a few more here and then we
Sure,
could keep
whatever you want to do,
going.
Talia. Yep.
Okay. If we're building a subdivision, will it be possible to capture the increased land taxable value from the subdivision in the subsidy calculation? So for example, if you're taking a $500,000 bare lot and dividing it into 30 lots worth 100K each, before homes are built, can that increase value plus up the subsidy calculation, or is it just from the value of the built structures? Not those are complex
That's a
question,
complex
but
question. Yeah, I don't know if I completely understood it. I think it's always going to be the difference between the unimproved land and the improved value of the of and the improvement. And so I think that's going to be the difference. Now, if you're again, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but if this is going to be a whole subdivision that you're doing, I imagine if the city allows that, you could utilize that, and the calculation would likely be what's the unimproved value of the entire subdivision and what's happening on the property. What are you trying to do on the property, and what will the value be afterwards? I would assume that they would look at that. If it's going to be subdivided, though, probably, I don't know if that needs to be separate applications or if they're going to do that as a lump. That's a great question and something I don't know that we've thought about. And might depend upon how your local jurisdiction does it. I would think from an assessor standpoint, it might be easier to have those broken up, but I don't know. It's something maybe we can ask our assessor friends and some of our sponsoring jurisdiction friends as we continue these conversations.
okay, here's another one for you. If we have a land lease property where the land is tax exempt, does this exemption disqualify the house from this program in section 25?
Yes, anything that's already receiving a property tax exemption is not eligible for this program. You can't, yeah, you can only use this or some other tax property tax exemption type of program.
So if the land is tax exempt, but the home is not property tax exempt,
Yeah, that's a great question, and I feel like we would want to run that by DOJ, but the language in the bill seems pretty clear that it doesn't work with any other type of property exemption program. So my initial thought would be no, but that's certainly something I'm happy to run by our Department of Justice attorneys to see what their take is. I'm not a lawyer. I want everybody to understand that. That's just my reading of it. Is it seemed like it was very clear that you can't use any other tax exemption type of program with this. And it looks like we have a hand up too. Tell you if you saw it.
Yeah. Okay. Shannon, are you able to unmute? Great.
I think so. Can you hear me? Great. For some reason, I was not able to write in chat. So thank you very much. And thank you, Rick. That's honestly how I've been reading the bill too. And I feel like it's a frustration, right? Because we've advocated in the past to be able to hold land tax free as nonprofit homeownership developers, right? And then also for like Lyft in particular, um, that we are exempt from the land portion for fee simple, and then there's a special assessment for condos. So it would be great to hear DOJ's thoughts. I'm wondering if we might need like a technical fix bill in session even. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you're onto something there. I do think that there's been some other things that have come up that people thought, well, that's not exactly what we thought was going to be in the bill, and so it would not surprise me if there's some kind of technical fix. And so I would be looking for that and adding. If we have more information, happy to share that. I just know that there's been talk about it because you're not the only one that's pointed out something that like that doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
That's not really intent. And so, yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Here's another question for you, Rick. Are condos allowed? And so maybe that's number one. And then can it be a mixed income development? So for instance, there's a 5-unit cottage cluster. Can only one of the homes engage with the program if the other 4, say, are for higher incomes?
Yeah, these are great questions. This is such a great group to have this conversation with. I don't see anything in the bill. I'm looking at my team to jump in if you have other thoughts or opinions. I don't see anything in the bill that would restrict condos from this that I recall. I would want to look at that, I think, one more time, but I don't think that there's anything that restricts that outright. So I think that that would be fine. In terms of mixed income, um, yes, we think mixed income was part of the intent of the bill. How that gets fettered out, though, I think is something that we're still struggling with, what that looks like. Yeah, so I think from our conversations with folks that put the bill together and had kind of the intent, mixed income came up, and their feeling was that if the city wants to allow that, that we should allow that as well. What our guidance is on that and how we go about that, I think is something we still have to grapple with. And if you have thoughts and ideas, we'd like to hear them.
Great. Believe it or not, you got through everybody's questions. So if
Great.
you
I
want to
probably
keep
didn't
going in
answer
the
them very
framework,
well, but we tried.
well, we will document these and try to follow up on some of them. But
Yeah, and we have a website for this, and we will continue to kind of add more information as we move through. One of the things that we really hope to do, as I mentioned before, is really kind of have a visual that really breaks these down more as well. And so that's something that we hope maybe by the time we send the program up that we'll have for you on our website. Okay, I'm done, Talia, and I'll turn it back over to you.
actually, I think this is you.
Is this me
You have
too?
a-
Okay, I missed the walkthrough. I think I wasn't feeling well that day, or that afternoon. Okay, so yeah, I think we just wanted to highlight kind of some of the terms and conditions in the bill. So first of all, eligible costs. What's eligible under this program? There's really kind of four things that are called out in the bill: infrastructure, pre-development, construction costs, and land write-downs. Those are the four things that the bill includes as eligible costs. One of the things that they talk about that I think is important is they talk about, I think, the ability to go back, and team help me. I think it's 12 months from the date of site approval. So you may have already incurred some costs prior to applying for the grant. And if those costs occurred 12 months prior to site approval, you can still use the grant for this. And so that's my understanding. We're struggling a little bit with what site approval means because I think that it can be different for each community. And so kind of our fix for that right now is that we're going to let the community tell us in their ordinance what local site approval means to them, so that that's hopefully clear in the ordinance and you as a developer understand kind of when that date starts. The next thing is affordability period. Again, there are affordability restrictions tied to this program. Maximum being 120% area median income. And that term is going to be equal to the period of 10 years or the term of the loan, whichever is greater. So in some cases, you may actually end up paying the loan. The city may end up paying the loan back. Yours is a grant, but you're paying that back through fees. City may end up paying that back sooner. And the reason that that can happen is because maybe you didn't need something that equates to that full 10 years in your request, or maybe that escalator that you're paying of 3% each year ends up having you pay that off sooner than that 10-year calculation period. So there are instances where that could happen. In those instances, you're still looking at 10 years. By the same token, it could be longer that you have to pay that back. So it might be a situation where maybe the city's allowed a little bit longer term, or maybe because of those admin costs that are added in there, that term equates to a little longer. Then those affordability period is going to align with however long that loan term is with the city. And then the other thing I think we just wanted to point out is that OHCS as an agency really usually works directly with developers. A lot of the folks probably on this call are folks that we work with regularly. We don't typically work with cities and counties, and we don't typically have an intermediary, which is what they are, between kind of our agreement with you all. And so that complicates things a lot for us. Complicates things in terms of, who's doing compliance on this, who's providing technical support, who's doing. There's a lot of things I think that we do that the city's kind of now in the middle of, and so like figuring that out, we just kind of wanted to let you know figuring that out may take us some time. As we develop these new partnerships with local governments, and kind of what our relationship is with the developer, we're not exactly sure yet. We're still trying to figure that out. So just wanted to make that important point that this is a little different relationship that we have than we typically have in our other programs. All right, next slide. This isn't me, right?
I think it's still you.
It is you, and you did a really good job last time.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'm sorry. It's been a week. Okay, yes. I think what we wanted to tell you with this slide is typically with OHCS dollars, we have a series of kind of requirements associated with our funds. Again, not being that direct lender, we're really kind of hoping to partner with the city to make sure that they're thinking about some of the things that we've done in the housing industry over the first 200 years of this of this wonderful country's existence that haven't been good, and that comes often down to things like discrimination and not forwarding equity and racial justice in our housing policy. And so we just want to make sure that cities and counties are really thinking through as they put these ordinances together, this program and including that lens on these dollars. We don't know what that exactly means at this point because again, the legislation is pretty strict, and we only have so much authority to do so many things. But the cities and counties actually have a lot of leeway here, and so we just wanted you to know that this is something that's important. It's of one of our values. We want to make sure that cities and counties are thinking about it. We want to make sure that all of you are thinking about it as you put your programs together. You know, how do we make sure we're reaching out to those folks that have traditionally been excluded? We want to make sure that we're not doing that with any more housing policies as we move forward. Okay.
So this is me. Thanks so much, Rick. And this is the part where we want to hear from everybody on this call. And there's a number of ways in which we can hear from you. So I will we have an easy retro board with a bunch of these questions. I think if you want to respond in writing, the best way to respond is through that easy retro board rather than the chat. So if you click the link that I just put in the chat, that will take you there. And you can put a little card by question, or you can just unmute or raise your hand and then unmute and let us know what you think. But I'll just walk through these questions, and we don't expect people will have we don't expect that we'll have time to cover all of them. Maybe I'll say it that way. But these are questions that we'd love to hear anybody that has thoughts. So what could potential homeownership developments look like? That's kind of the broadest question here. So if you're on the call and you have a project in mind and you think this might work, you know, what are you thinking? And then how do CLTs see leveraging this program given their tax exemptions? And maybe given some of the conversation earlier, I'll just put that back in our court to get some more guidance from our DOJ about the relationship between different types of property tax exemption. So we'll get back to this group on that question. But if you have any additional thoughts about that, let us know. What's the ideal way to codify the 10-year affordability period? So how might you track that these homes that benefited from the grant? Yeah, Parker, we only could fit 6 of the questions in there. So I think the first question isn't there and there's another question missing. So feel free to chime in with answers to the other questions that you don't have the chance to respond to in easy retro board. But yeah, so what's the ideal way to codify this 10-year affordability period? We know that some of you steward the homes and already have a system for that, but if this isn't a shared equity model, how might we be tracking that? What guidance do developers anticipate needing to ensure compliance with income and sales price requirements? So that's whatever their jurisdiction decides, and at the minimum under 120% AMI. What should OHCS's standards be around project application approval? What issues do developers think they may have with lenders associated with this program? Should there be limits in the pro forma on developer profit or developer fees? And then I think this was a question, actually, Shannon, that you had posed a couple days ago, but do you foresee other conflicts with other homeownership development financing sources? So do you have thoughts on managing multiple sources that aim to be gap financing? Two-part question here. So any conflicts in current sources that you receive for your developments, and then also for multiple types of sources you may be required to show that this is gap financing. So how would you manage that or any advice for us in how you show that, given that that might be a requirement for another source, and you need to show 2 committed or 3 committed sources at the same time that all have that but for test. So would love to hear your thoughts on any of these. We can, yeah, just open it up for if anybody has something that is not easily captured in an Easy Retro Board card, or we can start sharing the Easy Retro Board screen and just see what people are writing and maybe respond to that or reflect on that. This is also a lot to process. So if folks need more time to enter into the Easy Retro Board beyond today, we'll leave it open. Okay, I see that request that for that technical fix if needed for the CLTs. And Kim specified that question 7 is a yes or no. So feel free to maybe even just give a thumbs up if it's a yes, just to Kim's blurb or her chat bubble in the chat. And I don't know, what other symbol could we use for the no? Thumbs down.
Talia, can you remind everyone what question 7 was?
Yeah. Question 7 is, should there be limits in the pro forma on developer profit or fee? Actually, I'll type that question in the chat and you can do a thumbs up or, oh, someone already did that. Great. The Easy Retro Board is linked in the chat. I'll link it again underneath the question. And all you need to do to add to the Easy Retro Board is there's the 6 questions. You just press the plus sign under the question and you can start typing and it will create a card there.
Can I add an additional prompt to the CLT question? So should DOJ determine that we are able to award based on the value of the home or on the taxes paid on the home, or a fix is issued, it would be likely that the funding that could be provided would need to be less because you're not getting the whole maximum improvement value, or that the payback period would need to be longer. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that, if you think that my thoughts on that are kind of in line with what you might be thinking, or which one you would prefer for yourselves or your home buyers.
Go for it, Shannon.
Thanks. I'm so sorry. For whatever reason, I cannot access chat today, but this is working, thankfully. So Jessica, I'm thinking about this a little differently, and I would say, correct me if I'm missing something, right? So the way, as I understand it, right, when we build lift homes, for example, the tax assessors are assessing the land and the built structure, and they assign a value to each. The built structure is going to be just as valuable, whether it's permanently affordable or not. And the municipality was already expecting to not have the tax on the land. So I actually personally don't think there's a difference in the revenue source for repaying this revolving loan fund. It's just that the municipality really wasn't going to have access to the land tax revenue once a nonprofit homeownership developer purchased the parcel and filed for, so long as we filed on time for it being tax exempt. So otherwise, the revenue source is actually equivalent for the revenue stream that would repay the revolving loan, as I understand it.
I guess my question is, when you build your home and they distinguish where the additional property value goes, is all of that additional property value contained in the structure portion of the taxes, or is part of it also contained in the land?
I feel like that's a tax assessor question, but maybe others know and I don't. I'll talk to Eric Kinkler tomorrow, though. I can ask him.
Thanks, Shannon.
While we're here, please keep adding responses to the Easy Retro board. Oh, I see some new stuff coming up. That's great. Are there other questions about this program and how it would work that we may or may not be able to answer? So if you don't want to, if you have more questions, now is a great time to ask, or if you have other thoughts of things that we haven't asked you, but things that we should be thinking about as the team here develops the program further. Are there things you just want to call out to make sure that are kept in mind? Go for it, Shannon.
Thanks, Taya. Just still participating in the ONA, the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis Rulemaking Advisory Committee, and knowing that the work of that group is going to head towards adoption-ready actions. It seems to me that I'm thinking of this flow chart again, and this step of municipalities, cities or counties, first approving an ordinance that you want to participate in the MURL program. I just want to flag, like, that should become an ONA adoption ready action or adoption ready standard. So it just seems to me that making sure that there's some sort of interaction with DLCD, and however that language could be standardized to expedite that kind of approval for cities and counties. Seems like DLCD is really leaning into that kind of work right now. So just hopefully that collaboration is taking place. Thanks.
Can I ask? I'm curious. I don't exactly know how to take a inventory here, but how many folks are interested in this program? I mean, how many people would take advantage of it if your city or county said, "Hey, we're going to do this." So curious about the interest level, and it looks like Shannon may have Lane. Great. So a couple of you. Lucinda and Alicia. Okay, great. This is good for us to know. Thank you for that. We're trying to just gauge like early interest, so we have a sense of how, from a staffing standpoint, there's things we have to do, and so like how ready do we need, and how many requests are we going to get right away? So thank you for that.
This is another good poll for this group here. Has anybody had conversations with specific jurisdictions about this program yet? Thanks for the question, Kim. Oh, Talia, you're on mute. Oh,
thanks.
looks like Jillian says yes. I know you're in Deschutes or Bend. That's great. Yahats and Florence. Great. Do cities and counties have enough information about the programs for us to begin asking that question? Great. Oh, okay. Yeah. And then we're about to get to the next steps on the timeline of implementation. So great. Rick, do you mind answering that question about the jurisdictions? And we'll get to next steps.
Yeah, we're under a really tight timeline to stand this up. The goal, I want to stress goal. The goal here is to try to stand this up by February, which is I don't know how many of you are familiar with state government, but this turnaround time is really difficult for us. And so I don't know that we're going to have all the supports in place for all the smaller local governments that we would like to have. And we don't see that kind of second phase of really providing local government support to happen until probably later in the year of 2025, like in the fall. And there's a lot of things to think about there in terms of, what's a sample ordinance look like? What kind of information are we going to need? What decisions do we need to make in terms of what our local government needs to do, et cetera, et cetera. So, we have been reaching out to local governments. We've had lots of conversations with them. I think the larger governments are probably in a better position to do this right away. And I think the smaller governments are going to need a little bit more assistance from OHCS. And so now have they all, been involved and are interested in, we've invited, I think, a lot through we've talked to the Association of Counties and the League of Cities and let them kind of do a lot of that kind of outreach. But we've had quite a few of them kind of interested in it to various degrees. So I think most of them are aware of it in some capacity, but I don't know how many are really interested in doing it until we do more outreach on our end and provide more support, which again probably won't happen until later in the year. Hopefully that answered that question. And then am I doing next steps and milestones? Okay, I'm so sorry. Okay. So our next steps are we're continuing to do a kind of internal and external engagement. I know you're not interested in the internal stuff, but there's a lot internally that we have to do. Externally, we're continuing to do things like this to try to get the program out there and really try to understand the support level that's needed and kind of figure out some of these outstanding questions that really weren't answered in the bill, or maybe some issues with the bill and how we can work through those. So that engagement process is still happening, and we hope to wrap that up probably this week, if not next week. We have a survey out there that'll close on the 15th. We as an agency are really going to start trying to put things in writing at the end of this week, the first part of next week, and gather all the information that we've had and try to put some structure around this that is in more detail than what the current statute is and what our current framework has, including some kind of manual, and we also have to write some rules. We are going back to our council in January, our Housing Stability Council, to hopefully approve our final framework. And then the hope is to launch the program in February of this year. And as I alluded to before, and I think then we continue to work internally on educating local governments, providing support to them, and I think that will only increase as we work on getting documents together, getting a third party up and running, and probably culminate and kind of be at the kind of hopefully end level of the support that we're going to provide sometime in September, October-ish of 2025. So those are really kind of the next steps. We're kind of running out of time to give feedback. So if you have anything more, please fill out that survey or reach out to us. But yeah, we're going to start trying to put kind of guidance documents together and answer some of these questions probably starting next week. Next slide, if I don't know if we're doing the next slide. Oh, just thank you.
Yeah, thank you everyone so much for joining us. We'll keep the Easy Retro board open for the next couple days. If you have more to add in, and then also up here is the ARH email. If you have further questions or want us to, or really this team here, Rick and his team, to look into further things, they're the best ones to reach out to. But we're also on the homeownership side happy to talk through scenarios and then talk about them internally as well. But we're just really glad you all attended today. And based on what Rick just said, sounds like there will be some more guidance and information coming out soon. So expect to hear from us. But thanks for joining, and have a good rest of your day.